Hi everybody, it's Cynthia Kane, and I want to welcome you to our online module of science literacy that we're going to be doing for the week of April 18th. First things first, in just a second I'm going to show you where I have an embedded video on our Canvas course that I'd like for you to watch. It's from a show called Last Night Tonight with John Oliver. You may have heard of this or you may have watched this show on HBO. The segment that I'm going to have you watch is about 15 minutes long. I want you to go through this first. And the reason I'd like for you to take a look at it is that it concerns somebody that you may have heard of, Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz has been very popular. He's appeared on Oprah's show and I think also on the O Network. And he used to have his own show for a while on TV in which he advertised diet, nutritional supplements, exercise, eating right, taking care of yourself. All very good, all very much things that we need to be doing. But in this segment, you're going to see some rather entertaining and kind of scary things about some other nutritional supplements that Dr. Oz had been promoting. He actually wound up appearing before Congress because some of the things that he was advertising for nutrition were not exactly working, and in some cases they might be very dangerous to other people. So in order to get to this embedded video, what you'll do is just go into our Canvas course, click on Science Literacy Assignment, and the embedded video should pop up there. Just in case that doesn't happen to work for you though while you're watching this during the week of April 18th, I've gone ahead, I'm going to go back in here, swap this. I've given you the YouTube link and our PowerPoint presentation for the same presentation just in case the video embedding doesn't happen to work for you. So take a look at this first. After you watch the video, come back to our PowerPoint presentation. So what were your reactions from the video? I find it very interesting. Dr. Oz has a good personality. I think he is very good at selling different things, and a lot of what he says can be pretty credible and reliable because he's a doctor. He is hopefully a medical specialist. But as you found in the video, there were a lot of questions not only about some of the vitamins and nutritional supplements that he was touting and advertising, but also John Oliver was talking about the fact that this kind of seems to be a problem overall. There are a lot of things that are really good for us to take. I take a lot of vitamins, for example, and I take supplements as well as I get older. But at the same time, we have to be careful of any claims that one little pill is going to solve obesity. One little pill is going to make you feel better immediately. That's what we have to be careful about. And that is the whole concept of what we're talking about in this module, science literacy. This is one more pillar of information literacy, and is covered in Chapter 9 of our textbook. The definition that is in our textbook says that somebody who is literate in science is well versed in all matters pertaining to basic science and scientific laws, to the extent that one is able to make sound decisions concerning their well-being and the well-being of their families, communities, and society as a whole. It's kind of a long definition, but what it comes down to is everything we've been talking about so far in this 8-week course. If you know more, and if you can become more credible and more reliable, and actually more skeptical of information, knowing the questions to ask, you're just going to be a better consumer and I think be able to live a better life overall because you know the questions to ask and you know information to believe and information not to believe. So, in terms of science literacy, Neil deGrasse Tyson is a pretty famous astrophysicist, and I've always liked this claim. He says, science literacy is a vaccine against the charlatans of the world that would exploit your ignorance. Think about that quote because this is something I'm going to have you come back to for the assignment we'll be doing for this week for science literacy. I like that idea, that it's a vaccine against the charlatans that would exploit your ignorance. So if you know more about the questions to ask in terms of science, then not only are you going to be less ignorant, you're going to be able to protect others. There are 3 types of science literacy. Civic science literacy is knowing enough science to relate scientific laws and discoveries to matters of government and legislation. That could have to do with the environment, for example. If there is any question, for example, about the effects of recycling for a community, about probably no more than about a year ago, the city of Emporia implemented a citywide program for recycling, making it super easy. Basically, we have a cart, and my husband and I just think about the items that can be recycled that we put in the cart. Every 2 weeks, it's our rotation for the neighborhood, so we put the cart out on our curb and we're taken care of. In terms of science literacy, we know that we're probably not making a big impact in terms of what we recycle. But if everyone pitches in and does that, hopefully that's going to have a very positive effect upon the environment. Now, somebody else might come along and say, oh, recycling is just, it's just a big tale. It doesn't really do any good. But in civic science literacy, we know enough of what to investigate and we know the questions to ask that could have a good effect upon our daily lives, upon government, upon legislation as a whole. Practical science literacy. That's knowing the right questions to ask about science to make appropriate decisions about one's day to day life and livelihood. And that could also tie into the third one, consumer science literacy, making decisions about sound consumer choices. So, for example, I might find myself in the market for a car, a used car. And I might want to concern myself with, does this car get good mileage? Can I rely on it for good transportation? What does it look like? I might also be concerned, though, with the emissions that it's putting out, again, that might affect the environment. So, in terms of practical and consumer science literacy, I'd want to do some research. I'd want to look online, maybe look in Consumer Reports, which is a publication that rates a lot of different items, and be able to figure out what is going to be the best buy in terms of a vehicle for my money. So again, that ties in the practical and the consumer science literacy, knowing the right questions to ask so that my day-to-day life can be a lot better as a whole. Well, science works very deliberately, cautiously, and slowly. Evidence for medicine, evidence for curing a disease, evidence for helping somebody live with a disease such as cancer, that builds over multiple studies. And it's very rare in science for one study to be definitive. So if you have a claim on Facebook that, again, this one pill will cure everything in terms of obesity and you're going to lose a lot of weight, that's probably not going to be definitive. Who proved that? Who claimed that? And I want you to keep that in mind because this can happen when we hear about reporting or we hear news stories about some type of scientific discovery. Sometimes they're exaggerated. Sometimes not everything is reported, even when the author mentions them, and treating a single study as if it contains all the answers. Well, this is a link that I have that shows you how news actually is published and then how it appears in the science news cycle. So scientific research could start in a college or a university. It can be promoted by a public relations office, picked up by newswire organizations, A causes B, finally picked up by the internet. The scientists are out to kill us again. I kind of like that. And then it starts working its way through cable news, maybe even local news, local newspapers, local TV. What you don't know about A can kill you. More at 11. That is a really funny reference. Unfortunately, it's true to a lot of blurbs for the local news that is going to keep you tuning in because you think, oh my gosh, there's something out there that I didn't know about and it's going to kill me. And then I kind of like this. Hopefully it doesn't make it to this point, but something that might be completely taken out of context might get to your grandmother or another family member or a friend. And in this case, this person's wearing a tin hat to ward off anything that has come out of the beginning here. So you see how we might have research that gets translated, picked up, read, kind of retransmitted, and then finally probably completely taken out of context. And I really do want you to keep this in mind because that is something to remember whenever you're thinking about anything in terms of medicine or natural science or anything like this that gets picked up and reported. What's the actual study behind that story? What's the actual research that happened before that actually got picked up into more of a regular news story that everybody's reading? So sometimes this is not too easy to do, but if you are reading a news story online, for example, let's say you're reading an article from the New York Times online, and it has to do with a scientific study. Read that really carefully and see if you can figure out any clues that talk about the scientists that did that original study. And if you can't, I like to look at things such as Scientific American Online, Science 2.0, and something called Science-Based Medicine. These links actually do take anything that's been popular, that's really appeared in the news media, and they kind of drill down and they'll say, well, okay, this is what's been talked about in the media. But here is the actual science behind that. This is what really happened. And then that way, again, you are employing science literacy because you're asking the right questions. And finally, other aspects of science literacy. The purpose of most profit-making media is to bring eyeballs to advertisers. Well, what does that mean? That means that if I see an ad, and again, it might be, the latest pill to cure cancer, if that ad is produced in a way that's very eye-catching, well, I might believe that. Hopefully I wouldn't, but we had to keep this in mind because not all people are going to be scientifically literate. You will after you finish this course. Do you really think you're going to learn about a major scientific discovery in an obscure corner of the web, or in a tweet, or in a Facebook posting, or something on Instagram? If one study is very different from most of the others, what is the likely cause? So you want to look to see if there's something that's arguing one way and then another study that's arguing totally the opposite. Something's going on there. And finally, I am sure that most of you have taken some type of science class, either in high school or maybe right now in college, or you have. I took biology for a number of years. Don't forget what you learned in your college science classes. Again, be very, very skeptical. Now, the reason I wanted us to go through this is that now we're going to turn to the assignment that you're going to be doing for the rest of this week. So back on our link 4, go back here to home again. Again, click on Science Literacy Assignment. And there's the video that I want you to watch. Up here where it says video for the week of April 18th, that's where I'm going to link the video that I'm currently recording for you. The PowerPoint presentation that we just went through, there's another link to that if you want to look at that in another way. And finally, this is the assignment that I'd like for you to work on. So go back to the quote that I showed you from Neil deGrasse Tyson, that science literacy is a vaccine against the charlatans of the world that would exploit your ignorance. I want you to read an article first that's called Autism Vaccine Link, Evidence Doesn't Dispel Doubts. This article talks about something that was in the news for a long time, and this was really controversial. This had to do with the thought for a long time that children who received vaccines were far more likely to become autistic. And you can understand why parents would be really concerned about that because, they're talking about their children. Finally, that link was disproved a number of years ago, but there are still people who still think that there is a link between getting a vaccine to combat a disease and then that person or that child contracting autism as a result. Well, what happened was kind of scary. There was quite a run for a long period of time in which children were not being vaccinated for anything. And this might sound kind of familiar. There have been outbreaks in the last few years just here in the United States of measles, of rubella, of other diseases that were pretty much gone. They have pretty much been eradicated. But then when the children were not getting vaccines anymore, those diseases sprang up all over again. So kind of a frightening thing. I want you to read this report from WebMD, and I'm going to scroll down because this is actually a 7-page article. So when you read it, please be sure that you go through all 7 pages, not just the 1 page, and it's a fairly quick read. So after you read this, I want you to write a one-page double-spaced response. And I want you to think about what the article says about the connection that people thought about between autism and vaccines, why they thought this way, why that was actually disproved. And I want you to think about what are some beliefs, such as the false correlation between vaccines and autism. Why are those beliefs sometimes hard to correct even when you have scientific evidence? So, in other words, why do people still believe something even though that scientific evidence is right there to say, no, this isn't true? Why do you think this belief between vaccines and autism became popular in the first place? And finally, how would a knowledge of science literacy help with similar issues? So write a one-page response, do some citations or quotes from the article if you want to support your viewpoint. This is the rubric that I'm going to be using, so this is worth 20 points, so it's not really a long assignment, but just think about those questions and give me a really thoughtful response. And think about science literacy and how that would help. Then you'll submit your assignment. And when you submit your assignment, this one is going to be due a little bit different. This is going to be due on April 21st, but it's actually not going to be due until 11:59 p.m. that day. And the reason is that since we're not going to be having class the week of April 18th, I want to give you a little bit of extra time to watch this module, watch the video from about Dr. Oz, read the article, and give me a really thoughtful response. I will be available by email at ckane1.emporia.edu, and you can also email me through Canvas. If you have any questions, I'll be sure to be checking my email while I'm gone, and I'll be happy to answer anything. So good luck with this, and then I will see you the following week for class.